In my past mission travels before the pandemic, I have shared brief video messages with you from Israel, Mongolia, Haiti, and Washington, D.C. Today I want to continue here in Jamaica. Now, Jamaica is a beautiful Caribbean country known for its stunning beaches and tourism industry. What you might not know is that Jamaica has more churches per square mile than any other country on earth. So why is Feed the Hunger here? Well, tragically, and in stark contrast to the many places of worship, 85% of children are born into fatherless homes. There is a serious problem with families here. As a result, we are here to help these at-risk kids with nutritious food, school supplies, hygiene items, and children's Bibles. Now, let me pause here and share about an area of prophecy in light of the bigger picture of what's going on in our world. I'll start with a couple of verses that share how God views the passage of time. My purpose is not to get into date setting for the second coming of Christ. I do have a practical application in mind for us. Psalm 90 verse 4 states, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. And 2 Peter 3:8 reiterates, but do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. There has been a belief held by some of the early Christian and Jewish writers alike, known as the millennial day theory. Okay, keep in mind this is a theory, and our purpose today is not to turn this theory into fact. It is the belief that God has a literal 7,000-year plan for humankind. Starting with Adam and Eve, there are 6,000 years of man, followed by the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. Well, there are some interesting patterns in the Bible regarding 6 time periods, followed by a 7th. For example, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, as you know, and on the 7th day, He rested. Moses went up on Mount Sinai for 6 days, and on the 7th, God spoke to him. The destruction of Jericho took place on the 7th day after the Israelites marched around the city for 6 days. 6 days after referring to His glorification, Jesus was physically transformed in front of Peter, James, and John. God also instructed the Hebrews to follow certain rules that reflected a similar kind of timeline. Slaves served for 6 years and were freed in the 7th year. Fields were to be worked for 6 years and then rested in the 7th year. And people were to work 6 days and then rest on the 7th day. We should also continue to practice that. Within this belief of 6,000 years is that there are 3 approximate ages. 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus, and 2,000 years from Jesus' first coming to His second coming. And these, as I said, are approximate. These are generalizations of 3 sets of 2,000 years. Well, what year are we in now in relation to the possible 6,000 years of man being completed? There's no way to know for sure. But let's take this investigation one step further and consider the last 3,000 of the overall 7,000 proposed years. Specifically, this refers to the last 2,000-year segment and the 1,000-year reign of Christ to follow, if literal. So similarly, there is another interesting pattern that appears from Bible stories to support this time structure. I am speaking of 2 days followed by a distinct 3rd day that brings spiritual breakthrough or restoration. Let me share most of the major examples. God gave the 10 Commandments on the 3rd day. King Hezekiah was healed on the 3rd day. Esther went before the king and rescued the Jews on, you guessed it, the 3rd day. And we know the famous story of Jonah, who was released from the fish on the 3rd day. But of course, most famous of all was Jesus' resurrection on the 3rd day. The book of Hosea also refers to Israel's future restoration. It will take place on the third day. Well, while this is all pretty interesting, the temptation may be now figure out when the third day would start, if this theory is true. Should these years be calculated using a solar or lunar calendar? Did the final 2,000 years commence when Jesus was born, began his ministry, was crucified, was resurrected, or 40 days later when he ascended into heaven? Or did it begin at Pentecost? I don't believe we can know for sure. Okay, now let's get to the practical application I alluded to earlier. It's my humble opinion that when it comes to prophecy, it is important to be aware of what the Bible shares about the end times. However, some of it is literal and some of it is figurative. As a result, we shouldn't become too preoccupied or obsessed with it. Our energy would be better focused on two things. First, God is sovereign. He has a precise plan for man that will be fulfilled in His perfect and ordained time. Second, as believers, we are supposed to be living our lives in such a way as to bring glory to God. We should live our lives as if we could die or the Lord could return at any moment. As James, the brother of Jesus, reminds us, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Therefore, there needs to be a passion and a focus to our daily living. It is why we are here in Jamaica with our ministry partners, helping many at-risk children. It is also why we are focused on sharing the message of Jesus Christ with those who don't know Him. Remember that Christ won't return until every ethnic group has been told, as it says in Matthew 24:14. It would be wonderful if the Lord returned in our lifetime. Whether He does or not, we need to be about His business until His second coming or our heaven going. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of the impact you're making for God's glory. God bless you.